It's going to be a bit of a problem sort of finding it.
Thank you. Well, firstly, an apology. I'm not Graham Balworthy. I'm Stephen Taylor. Graham is unfortunately unable to be here, but I'm the Treasurer of the Tramway Historical Society, and I'll be speaking to our submission. I don't know whether it's a positive or a negative, but I don't have a PowerPoint presentation for you. So I'm assuming that everybody has read the submission, but I'm going to summarise a few points on it and then hopefully leave plenty of time for questions, which hopefully I'll be able to answer. So, Tramway Historical Society, established about 50 years ago. We run the Ferrymead Tramway out at Ferrymead Heritage Park and run basically an urban public transport museum out there. And probably most relevant to this, we restore tram vehicles that used to run in the South Island, and we have supplied the majority of the trams to the current operator of the City Tramway. So we have a vested interest, obviously, in that operation. The trams are supplied through the Heritage Tramways Trust, which you may have had a separate submission from. Now, we provided a submission to the three-year plan last year, and we're delighted that its views, the Society's views, along with a number of other submitters, were acted on by the Council at the time in terms of essentially getting the City Tramway underway again. Obviously not the full loop that was previously in operation, but it's a somewhat truncated version, and we expect that in the fullness of time, as work on particularly in Armour Street gets completed, that the original loop will be completed. But the further part of that submission was that the tramway could start operating through into the Cashel Mall area using the first part of the planned extension. And our submission essentially is to continue along those lines. Essentially, we don't see any capital in the budget for the current financial or coming financial year to continue that work. So our submission is basically in three parts: that we continue to, the Council continues to support the work of the tramway operator and other organisations such as the SCIRT, CDU and so forth, to facilitate the reopening of the full loop. That's the original heritage loop that goes down Armour Street, which is where it's currently blocked, and also the first part of the extension into Cashel Mall and then back down High Street and into the cathedral square around the back of the cathedral. Now, most of the work in terms of track work is there. There's about 50 metres that's missing, and there would need to be a crossover put at the bottom of High Street near the intersection of Manchester Street, and obviously over here would need to come up. The second part of our submission is that work needs to be done on completing the first stage of the extension, which most of the track is in place except for where it comes out of Poplar Lane into Churm Street and then onto the bottom of High Street. So basically completing that work, getting that infrastructure in place. Obviously additional work would need to be done to put overhead and so forth in there as well. And then the third part of the submission is to continue the work to essentially do what was considered to be stage 2 of that work, which is extending the tramway further down High Street and into the Polytech grounds in subsequent years. And that work needs to obviously, from our perspective, be continued. Now, we see that extending the tramway through its full loop and into Cashel Mall and so forth will continue the work that's been done to date with the tramway, particularly the extension with the reopening of it into New Regent Street, Cathedral Junction and so forth, of bringing together the various currently isolated bits of retail and activity in the city to give people access to those areas, particularly people from outside the city who tend to be more likely the patrons of the City Tramway as it currently stands. And with the extension into Cashel Mall and so forth, links that together with the restart facilities and shopping precincts there, down to where the new building on the corner of Litchfield and High Street is, that's just opening up there. Strangers, yes, it was on the tip of my tongue, but obviously lost. And then to extend down towards where Alice's and C1 is. So just bringing those various, currently isolated bits together, and also allowing for organisations to give them some focus for redeveloping along that route of the tramway and bringing movement, colour, etc. back into the city tramway, into the city via the use of the tramway to facilitate transport. So that's basically a summary. There's a lot more detail in the proposal, in the submission we put together, and I'm happy to answer any questions on that or anything else, hopefully vaguely related to the submission.
Thanks very much, and thank you for all the work you're doing. You guys have done some great work, especially with the gondola, and the patronage on that gondola has been quite spectacular. Can you just tell me...
Sorry, I just point out, we're not the gondola.
I know you're not the gondola, but you are. There are some associations with... Okay. Can you tell us how many patrons are currently using the tram?
Right, in terms of the city tramway?
City tramway.
Sorry, I don't have those figures.
2,000. 60,000 since you've opened. Fabulous. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Just so you're aware, in our book of submissions that of people who don't want to be heard but have written in their submissions, there is a very substantial number on the tram.
Yes, I am aware that anecdotally that there are a number of submissions, and we are, without having read all of those, we are generally in support of everything that those submitters say, and I'm sure they're in support of ours.
Thank you. You're probably not aware of, but some of the submissions we've heard earlier today have actually talked about extending the tram into either Edgware, possibly looking at other routes. Have you guys done any work? I mean, obviously some out to Sumner or to Ferrymaid Woolston would seem logical. Have you done any work around outside of the central city, if we extended the tram, where the logical place for it to go would be?
Well, I mean, the general feeling about the society is we're very pro anything that's done with trams, and obviously, as anyone who's got some knowledge of the history of the city knows, that there were existing tram routes that used to go out to Sumner, Edgware, and in fact they were the start of most of the current bus routes in terms of where they went. So there's theoretically infrastructure or so forth that could be redeveloped along those routes to put the trams back in place. We have not, other than sort of in our wildest fantasies, have not actually done any serious research in terms of actually doing those extensions, but we would be quite happy to support them. It's not really where the society is in terms of being able to provide infrastructure, expertise and so forth for doing that sort of work, but we would be happy to support it and provide any background knowledge and history and so forth from that we can.
Now you've got a steam-operated tram, is that right? That's right, isn't it?
We do, yes.
Yeah.
It's a Kitson tram and it dates back to 1881. The
It's
only
very
one
rare
of its
beast.
type in the world still operating.
That's what, sorry?
Only one of its type in the world still operating.
That's, yeah, thank you.
It did actually come into town in about 2003 for a brief, I think, 3 circuits of the tramway, but it's not something we would expect to occur on a regular basis.
Yeah, thank you.
We could. The main issues, as far as I'm aware, in terms of doing that would be cost. It's not the transportation of tram vehicles to and from the Ferrymead tramway is not a cheap item as far as I'm aware.
However, as a tourist thing, having the only operating steam tram in the world is pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah. There is a lot of anecdotal evidence from operators, particularly of steam railways and so forth, that having one steam vehicle available is not something that's able to be operated on a continual basis. You actually need to have a fleet of such vehicles. So while I'm not poo-pooing the idea of bringing it in on special occasions, we would love to see that happen. Regular operation is not really feasible.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for stepping in for your mate at such short notice as well. It's very, very good of you. Thank you. Guys, just in terms of the plan, you now get a break until 3:15? Yep. So there might be a cup of coffee out there. There is a cup of coffee. Anybody is very welcome to go and grab one. If you get there first, there will be one.